Hello, it's good to be back. Sorry about that. We've had a busy couple weeks, so it's been hard to actually get to the podcast. But to those who do watch this, is a Letter to the Left podcast where I kind of break down what's going on in modern events politically around the country, and I try to give you an in-depth analysis of what's going on and kind of a more middle of the road construct. Because at the end of the day, our job here is to try to get people to talk. So instead of, at each other's throats, which this episode kind of gets after it about it, we can actually try to make amends and actually figure out what's going on here. So without further ado, let's start. And today I want to talk about one of the hot topics the last 3.5 weeks, 4 weeks, and that was Minnesota. Is Minnesota ground zero? That's the question. That's the $1 million question. What has gone on in Minnesota is not really unprecedented because it happened during the George Floyd riots. But how it happened and why it's happening is semi unprecedented, especially when you really break down how it started. And how it started was very simple. We had a huge uncovering, that was not the first time, of Somali fraud in Minnesota. When you break down the Somali fraud, you're talking about a master network of Somalis from the country or from another country that came here both legally and illegally that took advantage of a welfare state. That's pretty much what happened. You can actually go into more of these stories. There's more of them. So this actually happened in 2013 and again in 2018, where they had investigations in Minnesota of Somali fraud over very similar things, where they opened up these medical facilities or these learning centers, and they claim that they're getting all, they claim they run this whole business, and it ends up just being a front and fake and everything. And that's exactly what happened. They got caught. And they've been caught multiple times. Again, reference 2013, 2018. Minneapolis has had this plague for a while, to the point to where when you Google Somali fraud, like a ton of different articles come up, not just of recently, but of a year ago, where they started uncovering like the autism scandal. I don't know if you guys are educated in that or are familiar with the autism scandal, but pretty much Somalians were pretty much Somalians were sitting there, and they were taking advantage of the welfare state by saying all of their kids had autism. And they were coached to say that. And they're like, hey, you do this and we'll give you a cut of whatever you get. So, like, it's a whole network. That's what these people do. They steal. That's just, it's not racist to say so. I know some of the left wing is going to say, I don't know why you are advocating so hard for this kind of insanity when it comes to people. How can I break this down? How people can justify this in any way, shape, or form. But I digress. At the end of the day, these started because ICE started to respond. And because of the Somali fraud and how big it got, upwards of tens of billions of dollars, that triggered this administration to be like, we need to get ICE and start swarming Minneapolis and start really trying to knock down some of that. Now, there's some speculation that some of this is strategic in the way of, hey, we know the Somalis had fraud, and we know that Minnesota, this district, is close to losing a seat population-wise, and if we can get out, because again, it's a no valid ID or voter ID state, so illegals can vote, and they do. That can sway a whole state, which, I mean, that's a valid argument, right? That's a valid look into what could be happening. But at the end of the day, the main part of it is simply just they got caught, and ICE responded in kind. Now, what came next after this was interesting, because it almost became like the next George Floyd riots prior to the catalyst event, which was George Floyd being killed. But it's interesting because, once again, we go back to the same thing, is these are not organic protests. They're evidently and overtly funded and organized by organizers that have trained to do this. And you see it all the time, right? This isn't a new thing. The No Kings protests, anything George Floyd related, were all funded and organized to create this chaos and division. It's organized for that purpose. They're not organic. None of these people would do that on their own, but they've been trained to do so. They've been activated to do so. And because of that, you had a growing disconnect with what protester. Well, first of all, what is a protest, right? For some reason, the left, and especially when you look on social media like Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, all of them, the left for some reason thinks that protest means that you can just go do whatever you want. That you can go burn down a building, you can invade a church during its service and stop the service and get in people's faces with their kids and do that, which, yes, is a violation of the FACE Act. I don't think Don Lemon will actually get convicted or face charges. I don't think that's ever going to happen in that state. But he was indicted by a grand jury. So, I mean, that's pretty rough. Either way, you can't do that. And there's a misconception that these protesters think that they can do that. Not only, they believe that they can stop ICE from doing their job, which is obstruction of justice. They believe that them blowing whistles, them shoving and spitting and barricading streets and all that stuff and getting physical and altercations with federal agents, they believe that's okay, and they believe that's within their right because their idea of what a protest is has been completely skewed by their liberal politicians. The people in Minneapolis, specifically in Minnesota really, have been so indoctrinated by their highly left-wing politicians like Jacob Fry, like Tim Walz, that it's all a power grab for them. They don't care about this. They just want to stay in power. But they have used so much hyperbolic speech, in reference to everything right-wing, right? Everything. It goes back to the first episode and multiple different episodes, right? I've talked to you guys about it before. This construct that everything right-wing is fascist, and that's created this idea in these people's heads that it is justifiable then to assault people who believe in something different than they do, period. They have become the very thing they swore to destroy, which are fascists, which is ironic. They're communists, but they're fascist. In my opinion, they're more communist because that's actually based on their beliefs, right? That's not hyperbolic. That's legitimate. However, these misconceptions that are also aided by rumors on Twitter and their these stupid left-wing Twitter accounts, like huge left-wing Twitter accounts that for some reason are telling them that, well, ICE agents aren't actual, or Border Patrol as well are not actual law enforcement. That's completely false. ICE and Border Patrol have been around forever. They can detain you. They can arrest you. They can pull you over. They are an actual federal law enforcement agency. You cannot just assault them and outrun them and believe that they're doing that. When you are stalking them, that becomes an issue. When you are then aiding and abetting illegal migrants, that is obstruction of justice. You are breaking a law, period. That's the misconceptions. They really don't think they are. And even if you do try to tell them that with all the logic that you can possibly throw at them, in their heads, and this is the dangerous part, they are so self-radicalized, because these people are. They are absolutely radicalized to the point to where it does not matter what the Somalis did with their tax dollars. It does not matter how much proof you have. It does not matter how much crime is instigated by these illegal migrants. That seems to be every week. Hundreds of Americans are killed by DUIs, DWIs, hit and runs, murders, rapes, killing by illegal migrants because these people come from countries that's the norm. It's all over the place. You can research all of it. And for every single 10,000, it seems like, arrests and successful deportations of violent criminals, all the media does is show like a quote unquote innocent abuela or something, right? I talked to you guys about this too before, how the media uses and propagandizes, especially this. The campaign is absolutely dreadful. It's disgusting at best. But with that being said, we're in a situation where it's getting dangerous. And we saw this already because the blur of these self-radicalized people's ideology has become so violent and so justifiable in their own heads that they are willing to confront armed, trained, doing their job ICE and Border Patrol in order to stop something that their own politicians know is bullshit, but they're doing it anyway. So what happened? Renee Good, we'll start with there. Renee Good, young lady, she was at one of these protests. She was a part of the protest, make no mistake, and that's a fact. Like, you can look that up. People are going to say, oh, no, she was... Again, this is how they work, and it's the same leftist bullshit. It's overreaction right at the start to get the baseline narrative down. She was a part of the protest. She was an activist. She drove there to barricade, to follow these ICE agents around. When they confronted her and they tried to arrest her, she tried to flee. She knew that there was an ICE agent in front, and she tried to run him over. That is every single body cam footage, every single thing proves that. And she paid with her life. She didn't have to, but she did, because she is one of these people that were so indoctrinated and radicalized by her own beliefs to think that it is okay to resist and attack and go after these ICE agents. There is nothing okay with that. There's nothing. There is nothing you are going to be able to do or say, or if you want to close your eyes and wish to whoever the fuck your God is, to sit there and say that is okay to do. You cannot assault federal agents. You cannot stop them. You cannot impede them. You cannot even impede them on what they're doing. It is wrong. It is against the law. And then they can detain you. She did not think so because she had been brainwashed by these hyper-leftist communists who are creating an insurgency. I want you to remember this term, insurgency. No different from Pretty. The young man, not really young, but the guy who was killed recently, semi-recently. When that first happened, the left immediately wanted to make him the next George Floyd. And again, the same playbook happened. It's, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to blow his godly image out of proportion, make it look like they just gunned him down the street. Jacob Fry and Tim Walz got right behind it, started just, literally 5 minutes after it happened. Started making all this political thing, calling him Gestapo and all this stuff. Again, when you use that kind of rhetoric, Gestapo, Nazi, shit like that, people think they're justified in attacking them, and they will kill you because it is assault on their life. They are then justified to use deadly force, period. But they tried to make him some sort of hero. And just like George Floyd, just like Jacob Blake, just like Breonna Taylor, the vast majority of America decided, well, we're going to wait and see this time. Because we saw these videos, no one knows what actually fucking happened. There's speculation that he tried to draw his gun, but the gun was taken, but no one knew that the gun was taken. So when he pulled back, the officers thought he was pulling his gun, and so that's when they shot him. Some think that they pulled his gun right before then and accidentally discharged a firearm into Pretty, his own firearm into Pretty, and then that shot, as he reached for behind his back to get the gun as well, in that split second, all the officers realized the gunshot and immediately gunned him down. No one really knows. And they're going to have an investigation, going to find out. The reality of it is that man had a reputation, and prior to that had been assaulting federal officers, had been getting in the way of federal officers, had been impeding federal officers for that whole week. They tried to use the nurse thing. There's some alleged that he was actually fired from his job multiple times as a nurse from multiple different hospitals. We don't know if that's true yet. But he got in the arena and he went there with an intent to get involved. I want this to be very well known to everyone here. You can sit there and you can believe that he should have been shot. That's fine. When you get into the fucking arena, you are in the arena, and you cannot control what comes out of that. I'm all for gun rights, obviously. But I know there is a slight intent to get involved when you bring to a charged event, something that is very emotionally charging. You are bringing a weapon that is concealed where you know you are getting involved and you know exactly what you're doing. Again, he was trained. He was just like one of these leftist activists, these commies that have been trained and paid to protest. He was one of them again. He knew what he was doing. And there's now multiple videos all over X and Twitter showing him literally confronting, assaulting, attacking federal agents, their cars, all that, spitting on them, doing all sorts of shit, right? So he is not some sort of innocent bystander who was just there to be there. He was in the arena. And so was Renee Good. The reality of it is, these leftists have gone crazy that they will sacrifice anyone and anything to hate and destroy the orange man. That's it. It's nothing else. There's literally nothing else. It has nothing to do with anyone else. It is they want to kill the orange man. All right? That's ideologically. I'm sure. I mean, we saw how they reacted to his assassination attempts. They do not like him. So anything that's associated him, they do not like him. Both of these people died because they entered the arena and got in over their heads. And they thought, just like all these other radical leftists, that they were justified in assaulting and impeding these federal agents. Now, what's going to come of this? I wanted to wait to do this podcast a little bit because I wanted to see where the dust kind of settled, because I thought it was interesting. And I wanted to see if it would get as big as George Floyd, which I had my reservations based on exit polls. The vast majority of Americans support deportations. Even when you put the scary word of mass in front of it, it's upward in the 60 to 70 percentile of Americans believe in mass deportations. It gets up to 90 when you're talking about deporting illegals who have a criminal record. So even when you're talking about anyone who's illegal, it's in like the 60 to 70 percentile. You saw it actively kind of fade away, both, when things started coming out, right? We started seeing, again, Renee Good, we started seeing her past. She was kind of a hyper leftist. She ended up paid to go there. She was not just driving around. Like, she was there to be in the arena. And Alex Purdy was no different. He was spending days assaulting federal officers, impeding their arrests, impeding their mission. So why does that matter? Because we are in an insurgency. Now, when I say insurgency, it sounds crazy. Because when we think of insurgency, especially people who have been active duty before or any kind of SOF or SOFS type background or even federal agency that works internationally background, when you think insurgent, you think people trained by blue, so us, or it could be enemy against us, right? In this case, it would be an adversarial role. But essentially, they're trained behind enemy lines to help topple and create chaos behind enemy lines to destabilize their country's ecosystem, essentially. That's what an insurgent is. Where that separates is there are insurgents who, like, if these protests were to start organically, that would be different. These are planned. These are funded. They're trained. All that is, they have lawyers. They have legal. That is insurgency. These people are being trained and paid for by hyper leftists. And then when they get arrested or assaulted, then they go to their hyper leftist DAs, district attorneys, or their hyper leftist lawyers in general, and they either let them out or their hyper leftist judges let them out to go do it all over again. Their point is not to protest. They do not care about freedom of speech. They do not care about totalitarianism. They care about sending a message. They care about inflicting as much chaos and pain as possible into the average American when they see that, and then use that as propaganda to destabilize the faith in the institution. Now, we have problems with our institution. Don't get me wrong. But that's exactly what these insurgents are doing. And you see it all the time. They start something. Almost 99.9% of the time, they start it. They start an altercation with a federal agent, a CPB officer, someone like that who's in the middle of doing a mission, getting someone or what have you. They immediately start it, and then what happens? The ICE agent, 99.9% justified, will tell them to get off, give them their verbal warnings, then give them slight physical warnings, and then get after them once they push it over the edge. But the key is they have phones around them, and what they do is they film that one little snippet, and then they blast it all over social media. It's Insurgency 101. You start a fight, you get punched, you film only the one person that punched you, and then you post it to get sentiment for you. That is what they are doing, and it's working to an extent. Not as much as George Floyd. It's working because of things like I've talked about. Liberal women in general are the problem with American society because they do not understand the reality of the situation they live. They see that propaganda and they digest it super easily and immediately feel emotionally drawn towards that cause. A cause that most of these illegals would rape them or kill them or what have you, who have beliefs on women being lesser than anyway, in a heartbeat if they got the chance. But I digress on that. We've talked about the feminism argument and the fallacy of it in general. But I want to make sure this is known that we know what we're dealing with. This is an insurgency. That is what we have here. Whether it's foreign adversaries, Russia, China, under shell companies that are helping fund these protesters, quote-unquote protest, the insurgents, what have you, right? Because it always seems like they can get away with it. That's really the big key of what separates something that's just like a protest that turned to a riot versus insurgency, meaning to do it. Because they get away with it. If we were to do that, like if a Republican or a right-wing person were to do any of that, let me look at January 6th. January 6th, they literally, stormed is even a loose term. They literally walked in a line, and those people got the book thrown at them. Not here. These people were let out almost immediately, just go right back to it. Because, again, it's all part of it. That's all part of their plan and their network of communist and leftist insurgents. That's what we're dealing with. So how do we fix it? Unfortunately, you can't really fix it. The Bolsheviks come to mind. The Bolsheviks eventually were able to take over. They murdered 60 million people, to include like 40 million Christians, just because they were Christian. And yeah, that's pretty much it. The way you get after it is being loud about it and calling people out in your public circles. It's on a mass scale. You have to spread this kind of word. You have to sit there and be like, hey, you know what we need to do? You let's say you're at Thanksgiving dinner and your liberal aunt or your liberal cousin sits there and you're in a whatever, right? Says some bullshit that's completely wrong. Call them out on it. Say, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? They're going to sit there. They're going to pause. They're going to look at you. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean? You know, and then that's when you start grilling them. You start getting after them. You ask them. You interrogate them with questions. You make them uncomfortable. You make them trip over themselves because the vast majority of Americans do not believe in what these lunatics believe in, which is no borders, by the way. They do. They don't believe in borders. But they can't outright say that because then all the politicians that they're supported by would never get elected, ever. It would never happen. So you start out big. You say things like, and when I say zoom out, it's like kind of like finding something you agree on related to the topic. So you ask your friend, hey, but do you believe in sovereign borders though, right? Like a country, you believe that countries have sovereign borders. Okay. Unless you're a complete lunatic, which we're getting there, they're going to say, no, yes, of course. then you ask something along the lines of, okay, do you believe that you should enforce sovereign borders to protect said sovereignty? Again, 99% of people are going to say, yes, absolutely. That's common sense. Okay. So how do you enforce those borders then? If you can just let anyone in here, and once they get in here illegally who don't even want to follow the baseline laws to be here, how can you sit there and say you believe in enforcing a sovereign border and then say, well, if you get in here illegally and you don't even try to become a citizen of this country, which is by law, it's something you have to do if you want to live here and work here. How is that enforcement? How and you're just let them in, right? It's like, okay, cool. You're just allowing for an invasion at that point. At that point, Russia has no way. They don't have to. They didn't invade Ukraine. They seeked asylum in Ukraine. Who's to say that, right? Like, it's preposterous, and they know that. That's why they can't say it out loud. That's why these Jacob Fries, these Tim Walzes, these Ian Omars, they know exactly what they're doing. They are training insurgents. They are creating an environment of insurgents in order to topple whatever reality that is true and flip it over on its head. That's what's going on in your life right now. It's funny, though. Excuse me. But it's funny because I kind of go back to the Ian Omar thing. Everyone saw that press conference where the guy, apple cider vinegar, and now there's all these pictures of her and the same guy, like pretty much, closer friends, maybe, closer acquaintances at the least. Yeah, that was staged. The way she looked at, look, and I'm not even a huge conspiracy theorist, that was 100% staged. Are you kidding me? No normal human, and again, if you know anything, like if you're a soldier or anything like a cop or SWAT or whatever, you know that if you get sprayed with something, you get fucking lunged at, first of all, especially if you're a woman, you get lunged at, especially if you're a prominent figure, and then they put an unknown liquid on you, you freak the fuck out and you do not go towards them. But she did this whole display of back off and then took a step toward him. No. That's not how that works. And she knew that. And she knows she got caught. Now, her stupid liberal women constituents are going to sit there and look at it on the Twitters and they're going to be like, oh my God, that was so powerful. It's preposterous. That was 100% fake. And that's the kind of thing they need to resort to. Again, I talked to you about it before, how the Somalis are smart when it comes to kind of tricking you and turning it back around on you. What do they always say when you start questioning their fraud? This has gone on since 2013, since 18, since now. It's always the same thing. You're racist if you believe that we're just committing fraud. They know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. So you got to be smart about it. You got to be better about it. You got to be quicker about it. We need to be wittier. We need to be more aggressive. We need to go on the offense. The right needs to. Because the left is becoming, yet again, an insurgency. They're becoming I don't really like the term violent, but they are. They're becoming a violent insurgency group where they truly believe, because of their self-radicalization and their politicians that want to stay in power so bad that they'd mobilize these people. They're becoming where, again, they believe that it's justified to attack you and assault you and kill you. And that's the harsh reality of it. I don't want to sound grim, but that's exactly what we're dealing with here. A straight up insurgency. So, anyway, hope you guys liked the video. That's my take on it. That's kind of what I've been just reading about, keeping up on it. That's partially why it took so long, because I knew I wanted to get something in depth and actually make a decent analysis. So a lot of reading went into this. I was able to keep it mainly close to 30 minutes, which is always my goal-ish. But again, I kind of went straight to the point because I knew exactly what I was going to say, because I spent so much time on it the last couple weeks. So anyway, please like and subscribe. Tell your friends. Again, one of these days we're going to be able to do a live one and actually start talking and stuff like that. So anyway, good night. Have a good one. God bless.